the highlights. The presentation is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. So the first part is the Bible study part, and then the second part is all of the candid pictures that I took. So if you are not interested in all of my personal quirks and angles for pictures, then I will not be upset if you leave at the end of the Bible study portion. So we're going to see how long this takes. Okay, so let's open up with a word of prayer, and then we'll get started. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the sunshine, for the fellowship that we have together. Thank you so much for giving your gospel to the Apostle Paul. And so today we follow in his footsteps a little bit to see the sights that he saw and to get a small glimpse into the life that he led to spread the gospel to not only Jews but also to the Gentiles. We ask that you continue to bless us as we study your word and everything that we do. Give us a good day today. All these things we ask in your holy precious name. Amen.
Amen.
So we have Greece and Turkey. I modeled the Greece, the blue color, off of the flag, and Turkey off of their flag, which is red. I titled this presentation Trip to or Road to Greece and Turkey because I kind of wanted to do a joke on the Bing Crosby movies from the 50s, so I thought that would be fun. Okay, so here we go. Day one, we have Athens. Now, the number one thing that you think about when you think about Athens is probably going to be what?
Parthenon.
The Parthenon, right? And I do not have a picture of it up here because Paul does not go there in the Bible. So that's in the second part of the fun stuff, okay? So we're going to read Acts 17, verses 16 through 34, and then we can kind of see what Paul did. So now while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him as he saw that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him, and some said, "What does this babbler wish to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities, because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection." And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting, for you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean." Now all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except in telling or hearing something new. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, 'To the unknown God.' What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each of us, for in him we live and move and have being. And even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by art or imagination of man. The times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. Now when they had heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, but others said, we will hear you again about this. So Paul went out from their midst, but some men joined him and believed, among him who were also Dionysius the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. So, this hill right here is where they would have taken Paul to talk to him about all of the preaching things that he was saying. This is called Mars Hill. It was the place in Athens where they would have the judicial center. So whenever the city needed to formulate ideas and make their decisions of what they were going to believe, they took them to Mars Hill. And you can see that it's actually the same thing as the Areopagus. So when you read that, it's actually the same spot, which I was not assuming that was going to be that way. So it's called the Areopagus. Areo comes from Ares, which is the Greek god of war, and then the Latin name is Mars, which is why it's called Mars Hill. And it overlooks the marketplace. So the place where he was going, this is the view that you can see from that rock, and this is the marketplace where Paul would have actually stood in view of Mars Hill. This is not the Parthenon. This is another temple built to one of the other gods. But this is another view of what that hill looked like up on top. It's obviously not paved. It's not very smooth. So it may have changed since Paul stood there. But it's very well known that that was the actual site where Paul would have been. Okay? So I just took a picture of this sign because I thought it was interesting. So if you know anything about Greek, you will come up with some words that are the same in the Bible that we hear in English. So the word for exit is actually Exodus. And that's what that sign says. So it's E-X-O-D-O-S, Exodus. So that might enhance your reading of that book. Okay, so here we go. So from the first day, we started out in Athens. You fly into Athens, right? And then Corinth is just a 1 hour bus ride from Athens. And it reads right after, in Acts 18, the exact next spot that Paul went was Corinth. So Acts 18, verses 1 through 17. After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth, and he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome. And he went to see them, and because he was of the same trade, and stayed with them and worked, for they were tent makers by trade, and he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath, and tried to persuade Jews and Greeks. When Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul was occupied with the word, testifying to the Jews that Christ was Jesus. And when they opposed and reviled him, he shook out his garments and said to them, "Your blood be on your own heads. I am innocent. From now on I will go to the Gentiles." And he left there and went to the house of a man named Titus Justus, a worshiper of God. His house was next door to the synagogue. Crispus, a ruler of the synagogue, believed in the Lord, together with his entire household, and many of the Corinthians, hearing Paul, believed and were baptized. And the Lord said to Paul one night in a vision, "Do not be afraid, but go on speaking, and do not be silent, for I am with you. And no one will attack you to harm you, for I have many in the city who are my people." And he stayed a year and 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. But when Gallo, the proconsul of Achaia, the Jews, made a united attack on Paul and brought him before the tribunal, saying, "This man is persuading people to worship God contrary to the law." But when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, "If it were a matter of wrongdoing or vicious crime, O Jews, I would have reason to accept your complaint. But since it is a matter of questions about words and names in your own law, see to it yourselves. I refuse to be a judge of these things." And he drove them from the tribunal. And they all seized Sosthenes, a ruler of the synagogue, and beat him in front of the tribunal. But Gallio paid no attention to any of this. So, the word tribunal, we hear a lot in that last section. And in Greek, the word for tribunal is bema. Bema is actually translated as the judgment seat. So we hear of Gallio presiding over the tribunal, and he would have been sitting in the judgment seat. One of the few rare things that we can say for certain that Paul definitely saw was this thing. This is the Bema, where he would have sat right here. It's kind of like a big old seat. Looks almost like a throne. And this is where Paul would have stood down here. And then the council would have judged him from up above. Okay? But what I really liked about this Bema is that you can see it from multiple angles. And you can actually go up on top of this little parapet and see it. And this is what it looks like when you're kind of walking up it, up here. And then this is what it looks like when you're looking directly at it from behind. So if Paul stood down here, that's fine, but Paul also could have stood right here and he would have sat right there. Okay? So whichever way you look at it, it's really interesting to see that that was the exact seat where Gallio would have sat. Okay? And it's interesting too that when you read that account in Acts, God tells Paul not to worry because he's going to take care of him. And even though Gallio was not a Christian, not a Jew, he was a Roman proconsul, he still refused to judge Paul the way that the Jews thought that he was going to do that. And that happened from this seat. So you can't really read this really well on this stone, but this would have been put there later. It's actually a quote from 2 Corinthians. So since we're in Corinth, right, we're going to quote 2 Corinthians. And it's that these things are in slight momentary affliction, but it is not compared to the eternal weight of glory. So that is a quote from 2 Corinthians chapter 5. So I thought that was interesting that that was in that place as well. Okay? Comments, questions, concerns before we move on? Good to go? Okay, so I have to do one little special fun thing. So I don't know if any of you are really into C.S. Lewis, if you read the Chronicles of Narnia at all, but in one of his books, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Edmund is tempted with Turkish delight. And one of the things that I found interesting was that in Greece, they not only have Turkish delight, but they call it Greek delight. So it's literally the same thing. Greek delight and Turkish delight is made exactly the same way. It looks like just a big white snowball in the picture, but it's actually like little jellies that have powdered sugar on it. And when you pop them in your mouth, they kind of just dissolve. And it's really, really sweet, really, really nice, a very light dessert, but I could see how Edmund wanted more than what the queen was going to allow him. So you can actually find Greek delight or Turkish delight all over the place at every stop. They have it kind of like how we would have Skittles or Snickers at every gas station. You can find any of this stuff wherever you go. Okay, so good. So day 2, we ended up going to a spot in Greece that had hanging monasteries. And what I mean by hanging monasteries, you'll see in a picture in a little bit, is they're on top of these mountains. And it seems almost impossible to have access to them. And what was saved over the hundreds of years in these monasteries is that they would make handmade icons. Okay? So I took a picture of some of the icons for you to see. I also bought some of the icons that I have in my office, and we have some at our house. So if you ever want to see those, I can bring those over for you to see. But I don't know if you are familiar with icons or not, or iconography. The yellow that you see in icons is generally 24 karat gold, which is plated, and it's the thinnest. They plate it out almost like paper, and they kind of glue it on to the wood. Most icons are made from cypress wood out of Greece, but you can get really cheap ones made out of pine and stuff like that. But most of them are really, really intricate, and I think the next slide shows you how the icons are made. So they start out by drawing the outline of the icon. They fill it in with the gold first, and then they add the lighter colors, and then finally the darker colors as it goes on, because it's easier to cover up a mistake with a light color than it is to cover up a mistake with a dark color. So they do the dark colors, the cool colors last, which I found really interesting. So this is the Holy Family, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. And then I really liked this one. I almost bought it, but it was really expensive, so I didn't. So I took a picture of it instead. So this is Jesus sitting on a tree, which we don't normally think of Jesus doing, but that tree is supposed to symbolize the root of Jesse, which is the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 11, okay? And then we have all of the different prophets of the Old Testament that are sitting also in this tree to symbolize that they are of the same religion, and they were foreshadowing Christ, who is in the middle, okay? So a lot of the iconography has a lot of symbolism to it, things that are ways that we can picture how doctrine kind of flows into art, and it's a really nice juncture between those two things, okay? So these are the hanging monasteries. So you see that there's like a sheer drop by the end, so it's not like you can just kind of climb up it, and it's there's not any stairs even. What you could see, if you could see the picture a little bit better, there's actually a cable car right here that would go between this rock and the monastery in order for people to go back and forth. Obviously, that is a modern invention. What they used to do is they would have this old pulley system, and in order to get into the monastery, you would have to get into the basket, and the monks would pulley you up. So those must have been pretty strong monks. I don't know if that's the duty that I would have wanted every morning to do that, but you see, like this whole rock, that's all it is. It's just the monastery. So they have over 28 monasteries like that, just kind of pocketed throughout that region, which is cool. So in this picture, again, you can't really see it, but there's 4. There's one right here, one right here, one right here, and one right here, and they're all on different rocks. So think about the building material that it would have taken to bring that up there. The engineering skills are just amazing. So, okay, so day 4 was in Berea, and it seems like we're kind of moving backwards. Okay, so the first day 1 we did Acts 17, then we did Acts 18. Because we started in Greece and we kind of moved our way to Turkey, we're kind of moving backwards for the life that Paul went. So I would have preferred to start in Turkey and go forwards because I'm an American and I like things chronological, but that's not the way it happened. So Acts 17, verses 10 through 15. So the brothers immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea, and when they arrived, they went into the Jewish synagogue. Now these Jews were more noble than those in Thessalonica, and they received the word with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see if the things were so. Many of them therefore believed, with not a few Greek women of high standing as well as men. But when the Jews from Thessalonica learned that the word of God was proclaimed by Paul at Berea also, they came there too, agitating and stirring up the crowds. Then the brothers immediately sent Paul off on his way to the sea, but Silas and Timothy remained there. Those who conducted Paul brought him as far as Athens, and after receiving a command for Silas and Timothy to come to him as soon as possible, they departed. So, in Berea, this is the the Jews that were a little bit more noble, and by more noble we probably mean have a little bit more money, maybe possibly a little bit more educated. And so they had a synagogue that we don't really know where the synagogue was in Berea. However, for somehow we know that the synagogue steps remained. So they moved the steps to this kind of monument that they had built there for Paul. So these 3 steps here are all that remain of the synagogue, and we know for certain that Paul stepped on those steps. So that is a real thing, it's just not in the same spot where he was. So this is kind of a little shrine that they have to the Apostle Paul. And I think I have some more pictures of it here that you can see. They built this statue thing, and it's all in Greek, so you can't really read it. I can't even really read it, and that's okay. And then they have these frescoes that depict the different scenes from Acts. Okay? So if you want to see any of these pictures in greater detail, I would be happy to show them to you on my computer. They're not showing up too clearly right now. Okay? Here we go. Day 5, Thessaloniki. So in Greek, they call Thessalonica Thessaloniki, and it brought our tour guide a lot of joy to hear us try to say Thessaloniki. So Acts 17, verses 1 through 9. Now when they had passed through the Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica. And there was a synagogue of the Jews, and Paul went in, as was his custom, on the 3 Sabbath days. He reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving that it was necessary for Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead, and saying, "This Jesus, whom I proclaim to you, is the Christ." And some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, and did a great many of the devout Greeks, and not a few of believing women. But the Jews were jealous, and taking some wicked men of the rabble, they formed a mob, set the city in an uproar, and attacked the house of Jason, seeking to bring them out to the crowd. And when they could not find them, they dragged Jason and some of the brothers before the city authorities, shouting, "These men who have turned the world upside down have come here also." And Jason had received them, and they were all acting against the decrees of Caesar, saying that there was no king but Jesus. And the people and the city authorities were disturbed when they heard these things. And when they had taken money as security from Jason and the rest, they let them go. So basically, Jason paid a little bribe to get out of jail. Okay? So this is Thessaloniki, and it is on the Via Egnatia, which is a major connecting road connecting Constantinople, which wasn't Constantinople at the time, and Rome. So all of these cities that Paul went on were all on this same road. So think about it kind of like Highway 75, that it's all one big major thoroughfare, and you just kind of hit all of the cities along that road. That's why we have Berea and Thessalonica and Corinth and Athens. They're all on this same road. So basically we're just following this road backwards into Turkey. Okay? So the Amphipolis that you heard at the beginning of that is between Constantinople and Thessaloniki, the 2 major cities in that area. So this is a really small part of Thessaloniki. It's actually a pretty big city. It's the 2nd biggest city in Greece. And this is the only part of the ancient city that remains. There's an amphitheater here and a little marketplace right here where Paul would have walked. Those would have been the same stones that Paul saw. Okay? And that's where the city would have been in an uproar, was by the marketplace. Okay? You may have one other picture of it. No, I don't. Okay, so outside of Philippi, on our way out of Thessaloniki, we came to Philippi. They probably call it Philippi, but we don't. So Acts 16, verses 11 through 15. So setting sail from Troas, we made a direct voyage to Samothrace, and following the day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city in the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in the city some days, and on the Sabbath day we went outside to the gate to the riverside, where we supposed there was a place of prayer. And we sat down and spoke to the women who had come together. One who heard us was a woman named Lydia from the city of Thracia, a seller of purple goods who was a worshiper of God. And the Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what was said by Paul. And after she was baptized and her household as well, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay." And she prevailed upon us. So, we are not sure that this is the exact place, but it is a river outside of Philippi that has been traditionally known as the baptism site of Lydia. There is a river that has flowing waters and that has flowed for over 2,000 years. So we don't think that it's possible that there's another river that this would have happened at. There is a church built on the site that has been there for a couple centuries. So it is traditionally believed that this is the exact site where Lydia was baptized. So they have built a cross right here with stone that she would have been baptized right there. Our tour guide said that she didn't think it was really right there, but maybe it was a couple hundred feet away. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay? And so this is the inside of the church that was built for Lydia. This is me putting my feet in the river. You can see that the water is flowing. Okay? This is the icon of Lydia, and this is the baptism of Jesus, which is on the top of the dome that is in the church. So this was probably the most beautiful church that we saw in Greece. A lot of the churches that we saw were kind of like in ruins, and this one was a little newer, and it was very, very nice. So to show you that, I have a video that I don't know if it will play or not. Oh, but you can't even hear it. But that's what all of the ceilings look like. Okay. And then we also had a little service there where we sang a hymn about baptism. So that was really special. Okay, so now on to Philippi. I'm not going to read Acts 16 through 40 because it's a little long. Basically, what happens is Paul is preaching the word and people don't like it, and so they put him in jail. They actually know where the jail is in Philippi because it is next to the courthouse. So Philippi was very well excavated, and so they know where a lot of the things are in this particular town. So that gate says that it is Paul's prison, as if he owned it. He was probably only there for a little bit, but this is what it looks like inside. So that is what Paul would have seen inside of the prison. It was just a stone cave that was built into the rock. But he would have been chained there at this exact spot. Again, one of the few places that we know that he would have exactly seen it as it is. Okay? These are other pictures of Philippi. This is the baptistry. So after the city had become Christian, they built a place to be baptized, which is interesting that it's in a cross, the same way that where Lydia was baptized, they made a stone out of the cross, right? So a lot of the baptistries that we saw in Greece and Turkey were actually in the form of crosses, which I was not expecting. It would be nice to, if the modern church in America were to do something like that, where you would go into the cross and come out of the cross when you're baptized. You see the really beautiful symbolism in that. Okay, this is a part of the synagogue that said that Paul was there, so that was obviously built after Paul had already died, but it's from the 2nd or 3rd century, so pretty old. And then this stone has the Ignatia Way. It's that same road that I talked about before. So there's stones along the way, kind of like how we have road signs on the corners to tell you which road is what. And so they did that same thing, and it has the major road that went through town. Okay? We did a little excursion to the city of Troy. I couldn't not put this in the presentation. Paul did not go to Troy. Troy is not the same thing as Troas, okay? Separate. So when you read in Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, when they go to Troy, these are the famous walls of Troy that have stood for thousands of years, okay? We all know the story of the Trojan horse, okay? That is not obviously the original horse, okay? If you are a movie person, that is actually the exact same horse that they used in the movie Troy that came out in about 2004, 2005. So because the replica of the horse is under construction, the movie gave this to the city of Troy, and I really like that movie, so I took a picture with the sunlight, right? And this is what you can see from the top of the city of Troy. You can see that there's the sea all the way back here. When Troy would have been a major competing city, the water was all the way up to the mountain here. So when you see in the movie that Troy was right on the beach, that is actually accurate, but it's not going to be what you see today because the water has receded. Okay? So we're not going to spend too much time on that. All right, so day 7, we went into Turkey. So the things that we saw in Turkey was not really what I expected. The cities that we saw in Turkey were the 7 cities of the book of Revelation. Okay, so I don't want to give away too much of my stuff because I want to, I'm thinking about doing that as my sermon series for this upcoming Lent, to do 1 city a week for that. So I want to save some of my stuff so you don't hear the same thing over and over again. But the first day we went to Pergamum. When you think about cities in the Bible, you don't normally think about Pergamum, okay? It's not going to be one that comes to mind. But what impressed me about Pergamum was how big it was. And it was so vast that you couldn't even take a picture of the whole thing. So I had to end up, I think I have it, yeah. I had to end up buying a book that had the full aerial view. They must have sent up a drone or a helicopter or something to get the full view of Pergamum. So when the Bible talks about it, when John is having his vision in Revelation, talking about how Pergamum has Satan's throne, they probably did not have an exact throne for Satan. They probably did not have the same thing that Athens had, where they had a bunch of altars to all of these gods, and they even had one to the unknown god. Pergamum's problem is that they had one of the biggest temples to the Greek god Zeus. So whether that was meant to talk about the temple for Zeus, they also had a large medical facility where people thought that they could be healed apart from God. If that was what John was meaning for that, it's possible. They also had a pretty big Dionysus cult. Dionysus was the god of wine, so they would worship wine and debauchery and those kind of things. So whatever John meant by Satan's throne, it could be either one of those three. It could be all three together. We're a little unsure. If you know anything about the book of Revelation, sometimes the symbolism is not completely clear. Okay? So that's what Pergamum looks like. Day 7, we also went to Smyrna, which is modern day Izmir. If you're looking for it on a map, it's not going to come up as Smyrna. It's I-Z-M-I-R. It's actually one, I think it's the third largest city in Turkey, which is interesting. The synagogue that in Smyrna was the most well preserved out of all of the places that we went. You can see that they have these arches that go down into the basement, and the pictures that you can get down there are just fabulous. It's exciting, really, really nice. So when you read in Revelation in chapter 2, I believe it's verses, it's down there, 8 through 11. I was going to say 6 through 10. That my confirmation verse actually comes from this passage, Revelation 2 verse 10, be faithful to the point of death and I will give you the crown of life. Okay, it's a pretty well-known, maybe one of the most well-known verses out of the book of Revelation, and that was meant for this church in Smyrna. So I took a lot more pictures of Smyrna just because it was more special to me because of my confirmation verse. But it was a really beautiful site. I was not expecting it to be so well preserved. Okay. Day 8, we saw 5 cities, which was a lot of bus time and a lot of quick pictures to take. The first day was Sardis, which is also in Revelation, chapter 3. Sardis had the most expansive area for their synagogue. The mosaics were the ones that were the best preserved. So you can see this whole area right here, probably about 100 to 150 yards is all of the synagogue in Sardis. And so I took a bunch of pictures of the different mosaics, but you don't need to look at a whole bunch of pictures of the floor. But the church was a very well-known and well-respected synagogue in the area, which was important for John in the book of Revelation. Unfortunately, the church in Philadelphia is not well preserved at all, and there's only 4 pillars that are remaining, and this is pretty much the best shot that you can get of the pillar. I'm standing right here, you probably can't see that, but there's 4 pillars that just stand up in the middle of the city, and a whole bunch of pottery that is crumbled on the ground around it, and that's about all you got. So the trip to Philadelphia, I think, was less than 30 minutes, because you take a picture next to one of the columns, and then you move on. Okay? So, and that's what I did. We also made it to Laodicea, which is in Revelation chapter 3, verses 14 through 22. Laodicea was not super big at the time that John wrote, but it got bigger. And so Laodicea was pretty much like Pergamum, where it was so expansive it was kind of hard to take in. But it was interesting how they had definite major walkways, major paths to go through the city that led to the synagogue. The synagogue was pretty well maintained, but none of the mosaics, none of the columns remained. You would just kind of walk through these 2-foot walls kind of thing with that. So there wasn't as much to see, but the city itself was very, very impressive. Laodicea was very influential in its heyday. And then the last picture there with me sitting down on the rock is Colossae. Colossae, where Paul wrote the book to Colossians, is actually unexcavated at this time. So it's just one big hill. And so we climbed to the top of the hill and we found one rock that was shooting out. So we all took a picture next to that one rock, and that's as close as I'm going to get to Colossae in my life, and that's okay. So, very good. Day 9 was Ephesus. And Ephesus was by far the crowning jewel of all of the cities that we went to in Turkey. By far the one most excavated, by far the biggest, the most well-maintained. This is the Via Egnatia through Ephesus. You see that there were thousands of people visiting Ephesus because it is so well preserved and it looks so great. However, it was 115 degrees the day that we were there, and so we were only able to handle being out of the bus for about an hour in order for us to avoid any kind of heat stroke. So it was a very quick trip. I would have preferred to stay there about 3 or 4 hours to soak it all in, but that was not going to be possible for that day. But what you see in Ephesus, which is also one of the 7 churches of Revelation, it's the first one in chapter 2. You see this great big library, the Library of Ephesus, which is still standing, one of the largest libraries in the world. The second largest outside of Alexandria in Egypt, that was obviously destroyed by Ptolemy. Okay? So you have this great big library, you have this great big amphitheater that can hold, I think he said 40,000 people, which seems really a lot to me. But it was really nice to climb down inside. We weren't supposed to, but everyone else did, so I did anyway. And I would kind of project my voice, like use my teacher voice, and it projected. The acoustics went all the way up. People could hear. So it was interesting how the Greeks were able to make that work with just stone in the middle of a mountain. Okay? While you're walking along the major way in Ephesus, you'd see some random stones that had crosses on them. They weren't always all together, but there was obviously a Christian presence in Ephesus, which is why the synagogue was there and why it was included in Revelation. Okay? Comments, questions, concerns?
You say some of these places they haven't started to excavate. Are they still doing all this excavating? Are they still looking for?
Laodicea was still being excavated, and like Philadelphia, the one with just the columns, I think they're pretty much done. I don't think there's anything else to really find, but there's always one spot of excavation in each place. One of them, I don't remember, I didn't write it down. One of them was being excavated by the University of Columbia. One of them was being excavated by the University of Munich. Another one was being done by the Turkish government. So I think they're pretty open to allow people to, not any people, but universities to have their archaeologists come in and do work there. Colossae was a very, very small mountain hill. So I don't know how much you're going to be able to find there. And that's probably why it hasn't been done yet. because people want to find the big ones, right? They want to find Laodicea, and they want to do work in Ephesus because it's so well known. So that's probably why Colossae has not been done yet. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
What's amazing is the construction that occurred over 2,000 years ago.
Correct.
And so well built that it's still around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, I've seen those, I appreciate that.
Good.
Are there any Christian churches there anymore, or are they just like real people who are Christian? in Turkey
So
or
I don't
Greece?
think like in Ephesus is not a modern day city, so you're not really allowed to build anything there, right? In Smyrna, which is now Izmir, it's a really big town, so there are Christian churches. They're all, most of them are not Catholic, most of them are Orthodox. So you get Greek Orthodox, and then you can also get Greek Orthodox in Turkey. 99% of people that are in Turkey proclaim to be Muslim, and so the Christian presence in Turkey is just so small, it's hard to find.
It's really interesting since it started with Paul. And
Yeah.
it's just
You
hard to
could
find.
feel the Christian presence in Greece. You can't really feel it in Turkey.
Yeah.
Because everywhere you look, I think our guide said there are over 218,000 mosques in Turkey. And so really, you can't throw a stone without hitting one. But in Greece, there were Greek Orthodox churches all over the place. The only one that we really went into was in Thessaloniki, and I think I might have a picture of it. It's to St. Demetrius, and it was a big cathedral. I think that they called it a basilica, and the incense, all the whole 9 yards. It was great to experience that. Yeah, good question.
And they let the Christians practice their worship,
Yeah, so are you talking about specifically for Turkey?
well, both countries.
Well, Greece is fine, no problem. Turkey is very interesting, and I think our tour guide spent most of his time trying to describe to us Turkish culture and Turkish mindset, right? Their worldview. The way that he described it is that because Istanbul and Constantinople, however you want to call it, you can sing the song if you'd like, stands right on the border of Europe and Asia, it kind of has an identity crisis. It doesn't know if it's supposed to be Asian or if it's supposed to be European. And so on the west side of Turkey, the closer you are to the Aegean Sea, the more tolerant people are going to be. And the further away you get from Europe, the further east you go, the less tolerant they're going to be. So we only went to the western part of Turkey. We didn't go to the eastern part. So yes, I saw women in burqas and completely covered, but it wasn't the norm. But I think the further east you go, the more that becomes the norm. So the area of Turkey that we were in was rather tolerant. And I think it's more of a, if you don't bother us, we won't bother you kind of thing. So if that's your definition of tolerance, you know what I mean? I don't know. So yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. This is like the Bible study portion of it is done, and I've got about another 25 slides of just pictures of fun stuff that I did. So if you want to, these are the extras. So this is the Parthenon. It was, of course, under construction, because everything's under construction all the time. So this side that you see is not the side that is the most well preserved. That one was under construction. So this was the back side of the Parthenon, which was fine. I was a little disappointed with the Parthenon because I wanted to kind of walk through the columns and go inside. You're not able to do that. You kind of have to just walk around it. So again, it was 110 degrees that day. So climbing up on top of the mountain when it's that hot was a lot. So We
When
took
you
our.
say construction, are they really building or are they restoring?
They're restoring. They're restoring. Yeah, with they bring the Greek government and Greek people take great pride in the Parthenon and what it has meant for world history. So they use the same marble quarries that were open thousands of years ago in order to get the marble to bring it back to the Parthenon, so it's exactly the same. You can tell what has been restored and what hasn't. The whiter the marble is, the newer it is. And so when you get that kind of brownish yellow, that means that it's old. So actually, I was surprised because it goes from white to gray to yellow. I was expecting it to just go white to yellow and then gray maybe, but it goes gray first, oxidizes or does whatever it does, and then it turns yellow. So
Are they expecting to put it fully back?
they won't do that. They will, they're really kind of solidifying places that maybe aren't super stable so that it doesn't fall down. That's what they're doing. Okay, so this is a canal that was built in the 1970s. They had been trying to build a canal there for, I think, 1,400 years, and everyone had failed at it, and finally they got this special contractor to come in and do it. But it was a really sharp jump down, and they actually had bungee jumping there that you could do off of the bridge. If we had more time, I probably would have done it. We didn't have enough time, so it wasn't going to work.
Sure.
Right. This picture is, I wasn't supposed to take it, but it was in the basilica on the highest mountain in Athens that overlooks the Parthenon. So what you can do, what tourists do, is our hotel was down by the sea, by the Aegean Sea. So we took a taxi about 5 miles up to the Parthenon, and they have all these different bars around the Parthenon that you can go to the bar on the rooftop and watch the sunset over the Parthenon. So we did that for the nights that we were there. It was really nice. But that basilica is on the highest mountain, so it's where all of the tourists go to take their pictures of the Parthenon. This was just a place that we stopped. It was really pretty. They had a town on the side of the mountain. It's called Arakovia. I don't know. Okay, so this is, I didn't show it to you, but this is in Delphi. So if you know anything about Greek history, there is an oracle at Delphi that was used with some of the natural gases that came out of the stone. The virgins would smell it, and then they would mumble something to the priest, and the priest would interpret an answer to whoever came with a question for it. So it's the most famous oracle in all of history. We don't know the exact spot where those fissures in the earth were. There is one temple at Delphi, so it was somewhere in that temple. This stone is different from all of the other stones because it comes from Greek mythology that Zeus asked these birds to carry the stone and find the center of the world. So one flew to the east and one flew to the west, and then when they came around the world, they met in Delphi and dropped the stone. So that, and to the Greeks, is considered to be the center of the entire world. So I took this picture of the center of the world. This is where those hanging monasteries were, and you can see how gorgeous it was, that you can go out on the rocks and just see these beautiful vistas. This is in Thessaloniki. This is a statue to Alexander the Great, who went through Thessalonica in his wanderings. But he really started out right by Thessalonica because that's in the land of Macedonia. So if you're up on your history, you know that Alexander the Great was Macedonian, and his father, Philip II, was Philip of Macedonia. So it's not odd to see a picture of Alexander from where he was born. Okay? This is our tour guide. Her name was Calliope. In English, we say Calliope, right? She was super, super nice. She just loved Greek culture, and you can tell. I'm not supposed to tell anyone this, but she bought me this ring because she liked me so much. It was really, really, really nice. Okay. This is in Thessalonica. They have a big walkway right on the Mediterranean Sea with fountains and the sun. It was really great. This is my cousin Ethan. He went on the trip with us, and we went on a Mediterranean cruise for 45 minutes. Guess how much the cruise cost? $6 for a 45-minute cruise. No problem. Okay? Watch the sun go down. Okay, so we had to cross this area of water in order to get into Turkey. And so this is the ferry with all the cars that drive on and then they drive off on the other side. I've heard of those kind of ferries. I've just never been on one before, which is pretty nice. This is me in the amphitheater in Pergamum. You can see how big it is. And then this is our hotel overlooking the Aegean Sea in, I don't remember where it was.
God already?
Yeah, right. So for those of you who are history buffs, I am not a war history kind of guy, but we drove past the hills of Gallipoli. Yeah, Gallipoli. Anybody? Bueller? No one? It's a famous World War I battle that between the Allied forces and someone else, and the Turkish people lost a whole bunch of lives, and so they built this monument to them. I thought someone might care about that here, but it's okay that no one does. Okay, so this is the different kinds of olives that we had. So obviously the food was amazing. I am an olive person, so I ate more olives, I would say, on this trip than I ever had in my entire life, and I was totally okay with that. My favorite that I ever had was this one right here, grilled olives, kind of like pressed on a panini maker, and then they put sun-dried tomatoes and red pepper flakes on it. It was just fabulous. And then in Turkey, what their custom is that they have all of this like perfume or cologne outside of the bathroom. So you do your business and come out and then you put perfume on. And the perfume can be natural, like lemon, or it can be pretty chemically, like rain, because you can't make rain into a perfume. But it was really, I just thought that was interesting. So the first day we all went, we had to do a bathroom stop, and our tour guide just took it and gave us all, oh yeah, put it on. So then the whole bus smelled, you know. It was fine. We just had really great views of, the sun was just perfect. It was always sunny, never cloudy. So this is in, not Laodicea, the other one. Sardis, that was in Sardis. And this was too. And then this was Smyrna. This is down in the bottom where they had the arches. And this was supposedly an original spring that would have gone through the city that's still going there. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Okay? This kind of allows you to see the inside of a column, which isn't necessarily something that is common for people to see. They would put lead in here in order to fuse the stone together so that it would always stay where it would go. And I guess what they did about 200, 300 years ago was that they took a lot of it apart and harvested the lead out of it, which doesn't really make sense to me because in my head, lead is pretty cheap and easy to come by, but apparently they thought at the time that it was really necessary. So they took apart some of the columns and some of the stones and bricks in order to get the lead out of them. This is another picture of Smyrna, just the columns that are all lined up. This is Sardis, so you can see this is down into the earth. It was actually part of the Roman baths that was there, so that was the cool pool where you would be able to cool off after all of the bath in the back part of it, which I thought was really interesting. Another picture with me in the column. This is at Philadelphia, so we have this huge pot that you would, most of the time you kind of see them in the ground and only the top part would be exposed, probably for refrigeration, right? But I just thought it was really interesting that it's on this rubber tire sitting on the ground. Right? And then this is me standing next to some of the columns, so you can kind of see how large the columns would have actually been. Just completely massive. So this is actually at Hierapolis. So I haven't talked about that yet, but that was one of the cities that we went to in the 5 days. And they have these natural springs, but they are full of calcium bicarbonate. And so they turn white, and they are natural calcium pools that people swim in, supposedly for the health benefits, kind of like what we do with Epsom salts kind of thing. Our tour guide said that all of it's made up, that it actually doesn't do anything to you, but people like to think it does anyway. So you can't really tell, but the water is completely white right here from the calcium that's in it, and it leaves calcium deposits. So the whole side of the mountain is completely white. You can see it from many, many, many miles away. It was a very popular site in ancient times for healing. Okay? This was also part of the Hierapolis. You can see this is kind of like a public pool, but if you notice, they have all of these rocks. They're swimming along these ancient columns that are just in the pool that no one's bothered to take out, and that's just what they do. So I found that to be pretty interesting. Okay, this is my cousin Ethan and I on the top of Colossae. This is what you can see. If you can see back here, this is where this Hierapolis is. This is the white side of the mountain up here. So they're all kind of really close to each other, which is interesting too. Okay. One of the things that we did is that me?
That's not me.
It sounded like Spanish for a minute.
It did.
Okay. We also went to a rug factory that did homemade rugs. They hand stitch them and pull them down, and it's this huge process. It takes between 1 and 10 years for a woman working 8 hours a day every day to make one. So as you can probably guess, they're rather expensive. The cheapest one I could find was $900, and I just couldn't bring myself to buy one pretty much because Amanda wouldn't let me. This is a picture you can see closer up. National Geographic in 2013 did a story on the oldest carpet in the world. And so what this carpet factory did was that they remade it the same exact way that it would have been. So you too, for a mere price of $5,000, can own a copy of the oldest carpet in the entire world. So this is actually one of the carpets. You would think that it's a painting, but it's not. It's made out of silk thread. Okay. Very, very interesting. Very detailed. These are some more pictures. Cousin Ethan's photobombing me. And this is a faraway picture of the library in Ephesus. So you can see kind of how it's freestanding there. And it really dominates the viewpoint of the entire city. In Ephesus, these were the public toilets. So you've got these little holes right here. They were a little bit too close for my comfort, but I think that people would have gotten used to that somehow in Ephesus. So, we also went to Istanbul. The picture that you see in the back, that is the Hagia Sophia, which was one of the major reasons why I wanted to go on this trip. I've always wanted to go there. The Turkish government has a Sultan's Palace right next to the Hagia Sophia, and in it, it has much of the national treasures. Like the Tower of London has all of the treasures for the British monarchy. And so what you see on the top picture there is the largest diamond in the world, 84 carats. So if you want to buy that for your wife, might have to pay a pretty heavy price. Our tour guide made a really big deal about this dagger. I had never heard of it before, but apparently what's his name? Ustinov, the actor. Do you know what I'm talking about? Peter Ustinov made a movie about it in the 1950s, the Tipagogni dagger or something. So that's a picture of the dagger if you've ever seen that movie. I have to look it up. So this is more of the palace, and then this is probably my favorite picture that I took the whole time. That is the famous Bosporus River that goes through Istanbul that divides Europe and Asia. So right here, you see Europe. This is the European side. This is the Asian side. This is the palace. So the palace overlooked the major trade route to the majority of the world at that time, and reminded everyone who was actually in charge. This is a sarcophagus, supposedly of Alexander the Great. It was found in Sidon, which is mentioned in the Bible. No one could tell me why he would have been buried in Sidon. I had always learned that he was buried in Babylon, but supposedly this is his sarcophagus. It was very intricate with battle scenes from different battles that he had been in. I had always learned that he was wounded in a battle in India and then brought back to Babylon and died, but that's not necessarily what all the signs said. Yes?
So they ever open the lid and peek inside to see if there's anything in there?
I mean, it's plated glass all around it, so you can't touch it. I would be okay with that, but I don't know if the Turkish government would be okay with it. So,
X-ray.
X-ray, there you go. So, this is inside of the Hagia Sophia, if you've ever wondered what it looks like. Visitors are only allowed to go on the second level because it has been converted into a mosque. So since it is an active mosque, you are not allowed on the prayer level. So the bottom level is where they pray. So we walked all around on the top level. These massive signs are names of Muhammad and his prophets and his family. But it's really interesting because it was originally a Christian church, right? Built by Constantine. So there are a lot of Christian artifacts still left over, even though it is acting as an active mosque. This is probably the most impressive. It was right here, which you probably can't see, but the close-up is this. Can anyone tell me what they think that is?
First glance, it looks like an angel.
It's an angel. How does this angel look like? What do you notice?
Is there 3 sets of wings?
There's 3 sets of wings. What are the wings doing?
Flying.
Flying and covering the feet.
Revelation.
Is it Revelation?
Yeah.
The seraphim, right? So you have pictures of the seraphim overlooking the altar, guarding our worship to God, which is great. And then down here is an ancient mosaic of Mary and Christ. And he told me what the other two are, but I don't remember right now. They're in my notes somewhere. And then last but not least, the food. The food was amazing. I've always wanted to try authentic Greek food. There's a lot more tomatoes in Greek food than I was expecting. I was expecting more olives and I got more tomatoes. This was the best meal I had the whole time, which doesn't look like much, but they had roasted onions cooked in sumac. If you've ever had sumac, it's one of my favorite things. A spicy tomato dip, tzatziki dip with cucumber and dill, and then also some spiced garbanzo beans. So you put that all in the pita, and you wrap it all together, and it was amazing. I'm telling you, the baklava that I had, the best baklava in the entire world. I had chocolate baklava made with chocolate phyllo dough, which I didn't know was possible. I did not. It would not have lasted. I actually bought it on the last day, hoping to do that, and when I opened it up in the morning to put it in my bag, it was already turning, so I just had to eat it. Right, the things I do for my wife. And then, yeah, so that's my last slide. So that's the trip. Oh, my pleasure. I hope it was edifying for you and for your faith and for you to see some of the exact things that Paul saw. It kind of makes the New Testament come to life in a way that maybe you weren't expecting it to do before. So that is why we go on these trips, right? So next week we will meet and we will do Genesis chapter 11. Super exciting with the Tower of Babel.
Did you try the Turkish coffee?
I had Turkish coffee in the Turkish bazaar in Istanbul. I had it with a little bit of sugar. I probably would have liked it with a little bit more sugar.
A lot more sugar.
Yeah, it was super strong. I also drank too much of it. So if you know anything about Turkish coffee, they have the granules at the bottom. And I was enjoying it, and I drank too much. I got some of the granules in my mouth, which was not a very good taste at all. I actually preferred the Greek coffee. But our Greek taxi driver told us that the euros were actually better in Turkey than they were in Greece. So we waited, and we had a euro by the Hagia Sophia, and it was the best euro I've ever had in my life. Really, really good. Because who gets to say that? I had a euro at the Hagia Sophia, right? So.
Pastor,
Yeah.
next Thursday is the 4th.
Is the 4th of July? Well, I guess we get a week off then. Well, that's nice. Yeah.
Pastor, your picture with the Bosphorus,
Yes.
the classes of roads, was that across there on the, it looked like it was very, very wide there, but would the classes of roads be anywhere?
Are you talking about like the statue?
Yeah.
Oh, no. So Rhodes is all the way down at the bottom of the Aegean Sea. So it would not have been close to Istanbul. Yeah. We did not make it that far. It's an island. We didn't do any island hopping. So everyone that found out our itinerary said, well, you got to come back to Greece because you have to go to Mykonos, Santorini, and Rhodes, and all of the nice islands that they have there. So, yeah. Good question. All right, well, we'll see you on Sunday. Thanks for coming. I would not do it again. The bad temperature was not great.